Be best, just two simple words, yet loaded with ambition, controversy, and symbolism. When Melania Trump stood before the cameras in May 2018 to unveil her signature initiative as First Lady, she asked America a question without saying it directly. Could her campaign truly change the lives of children, or was it destined to be remembered as just another polished performance in the relentless theater of Washington politics? The words themselves carried a kind of universal hope. Be best, a call for children to be their strongest selves, their healthiest selves, their kindest selves. Melania declared that this campaign would take on three of the most pressing issues facing American youth: the rise of online bullying, the silent crisis of mental health, and the need to teach children how to navigate the digital world responsibly. She positioned herself not as a politician, but as a mother who knew the worries of raising a child in an age of constant screens and endless online noise. The launch was carefully staged. Standing in the White House Rose Garden, Melania spoke softly but firmly, her accent still thick with the cadence of her Slovenian roots, reminding the world that she was unlike any First Lady before her. Cameras captured her elegance, her composure, her ability to draw attention without ever raising her voice. To her supporters, this was a rare moment of authenticity, a glimpse of a woman who wanted to use her platform for good. To her critics, however, it was hard not to notice the contradiction. How could the wife of a president who wielded Twitter like a weapon now stand as a champion against cyberbullying? Yet in that moment, Melania seemed determined to carve out her own path. The Be Best initiative, at least in its spirit, was built around values that resonated with parents across the country. Every parent, no matter their political belief, knew the fear of seeing their child become the target of online cruelty. Every teacher recognized the hidden struggles of children battling anxiety or depression, and every family understood the urgent need to guide young people through a digital landscape more treacherous than any generation had ever faced before. The question that lingered was not whether the message was noble; it clearly was. The deeper question was whether Melania's effort could survive the cynicism of politics, whether it could grow into something real and lasting. Was Be Best truly for the children of America, or was it a neatly packaged image campaign designed to soften her husband's controversial presidency? From the very beginning, the initiative carried the weight of both promise and doubt. And as we revisit its origins, we are left with the same haunting curiosity that first surrounded it. Was Be Best the First Lady's heartfelt attempt to make a difference, or simply one more carefully crafted performance in the grand political stage of America? Before we dive into this captivating story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive stories about power, wealth, and the hidden truths behind the world's most talked about figures. When Melania Trump first presented the vision behind Be Best, it was clear she wanted to aim higher than a slogan. At its heart, the campaign carried a simple but profound goal: to shield children from the crushing pressures of a modern world where technology, social media, and society itself often seemed overwhelming. Melania framed her initiative as a protective shield, one that could give children the tools to grow, not only strong but also kind, resilient, and confident in a digital age that often stripped them of innocence far too soon. She spoke about the dangers lurking in the unseen corners of the internet: cyberbullying that could break a child's spirit, peer pressure, magnified by likes and comments, and the silent burden of mental health struggles that children were often too afraid to express. In Melania's words, children deserved to know that they were valued, that their voices mattered, and that they had the right to a safe environment where their well-being came before clicks, views, or retweets. It was a vision rooted in compassion, and in many ways it was also rooted in her own personal story. Because Melania Trump was not just the First Lady. She wanted the world to see her as something more: a mother. A woman who, like millions of parents, worried about the future of her child Barron growing up in a time when the digital world was no longer optional but inescapable. By placing motherhood at the center of her campaign, she sought to draw a line between her identity and her husband's divisive presidency. She was not only the wife of Donald Trump, she implied. She was her own voice, her own advocate, her own brand of influence. This was perhaps the deeper meaning of Be Best. It was not simply a public health initiative. It was Melania's attempt to define herself on her own terms, in her own language, in her own chosen role. For years, she had been perceived largely through the lens of her husband, his business empire, his controversies, his power. With Be Best, she reached for something that was distinctly hers. She wanted to show America, and perhaps even herself, that she could step out from the shadow of the Trump name and stand in the light of her own purpose. The vision was ambitious, even idealistic. Melania did not promise sweeping legislative reform or billion-dollar budgets. What she promised was a voice calm, steady and maternal, reminding the nation that children were fragile and deserved protection. Her critics dismissed it as vague and toothless, but to her supporters, the strength of the campaign was precisely in its humanity. It was a reminder that in the loud and chaotic world of politics, there was still space for empathy, still space for a mother's touch. And in shaping Be Best this way, Melania Trump sought not only to protect America's children, but also to redefine herself no longer just an accessory to power, but a voice of her own carrying both the softness of compassion and the quiet strength of independence. The unveiling of Be Best was more than just the launch of a First Lady's initiative. It was a carefully orchestrated moment of theater, staged in one of the most symbolic places in America, the White House Rose Garden. The afternoon sun filtered gently through the leaves, the podium gleamed with the presidential seal, and rows of reporters from every major news outlet sat waiting, pens and hand cameras, ready to capture every detail. This was Melania Trump's moment, and the world was watching. When she stepped onto the stage, there was no thunder, no sharp edge, none of the political fire that had become synonymous with her husband's presence. Instead, Melania appeared in her signature calm, almost serene composure. Her movements were graceful, her voice soft yet deliberate, and her expression carried that air of distance that had always made her an enigma. To those present, the contrast was striking. While Donald Trump's politics were defined by volume, confrontation, and spectacle, Melania embodied the opposite: subtlety, stillness, and a kind of quiet elegance that seemed almost foreign in Washington's noisy arena. The cameras lingered on her as she spoke. For a moment, the headlines were not about chaos in the West Wing, not about fiery tweets or political storms. Instead, they captured an image of a First Lady who stood apart, a woman who, without shouting, demanded attention through her very restraint. The media had often portrayed her as distant, even reluctant, but in that moment, Melania was deliberate. She was telling her story on her own terms, framed not by her husband's booming voice, but by her own quiet determination. The symbolism was unmistakable. In a White House dominated by controversy, Be Best was presented as something pure, almost apolitical. Melania was framed as a gentle counterbalance, her campaign a softer melody playing against the drumbeat of division. To her admirers, this contrast was refreshing, a reminder that leadership did not always have to roar, that sometimes it could whisper and still be heard. To her critics, however, the elegance was only surface deep, masking a campaign with little substance behind the polished optics. Yet no one could deny the power of the image. The sight of Melania poised, elegant, measured, standing at the very heart of American political power represented her attempt to carve out her own chapter in history. This was her stage, her message, her vision broadcast across every network and printed in every major paper. For once, the spotlight was not shared. And in the midst of the noise of American politics, that moment of quiet, Melania's quiet, was perhaps the loudest message of all. No sooner had Be Best been launched with elegance and ceremony than the storm of criticism began to gather. For all the polished speeches and carefully staged images, skeptics quickly asked, what exactly does this campaign do? Beyond the slogans, beyond the soft words, critics pointed to the lack of concrete projects, measurable goals, or large-scale initiatives. To them, Be Best felt more like an echo than a voice, a campaign with style but without substance, a headline without a story. Editorials in major newspapers questioned its depth. Commentators on television labeled it thin, unclear, even hollow. They argued that while Melania had spoken of protecting children from online bullying, improving their mental health, and guiding them through the digital world, there were few signs of real programs that could make those ideals a reality. Parents and educators who wanted tangible resources, funding, or nationwide programs often found only brochures, speeches, or symbolic appearances. It was a campaign that seemed to hover above the surface without ever diving into the trenches where real change was needed. And then there was the contradiction, one so glaring, it became the defining criticism of Be Best. How could Melania Trump, the wife of a president who used Twitter daily as a weapon of ridicule, claimed to lead a national effort against online bullying. Donald Trump's social media was infamous for its sharp insults, mocking nicknames, and relentless public attacks on his opponents. To many, this was hypocrisy. In its purest form, the White House could not preach kindness online while simultaneously setting the very opposite example from the highest office in the land. Late-night comedians seized on the irony, turning "Be Best" into a punchline. Headlines framed it as "Do as I say, not as my husband tweets." Critics accused Melania of trying to polish the image of an administration built on division, of offering a gentle mask to cover a harsher political reality. To them, the campaign was not just vague, it was insincere, even fake in its very message. But within the criticism was also something more complicated. Some wondered if Melania was quietly pushing back against her husband's style, trying to create a softer counterweight in a household defined by conflict. Was Be Best an act of hypocrisy, or was it her subtle rebellion, a way of drawing her own line, even if the contradictions made it impossible to fully succeed? In the end, the controversy became inseparable from the campaign itself. Be Best could not escape the shadow of Donald Trump's Twitter feed, nor could Melania fully silence those who dismissed her efforts as empty. The vision she presented, noble in words, collided with the brutal reality of politics, leaving behind a campaign remembered as much for its contradictions as for its intentions. Yet for all the storms of criticism, Be Best was not without defenders. Beyond the noise of political debate, there were voices softer, less amplified, but sincere, that rose to remind the public of something important. Melania Trump, despite all the contradictions of her position, genuinely seemed to care about children. To them, her campaign was not a hollow echo of public relations strategy, but the heartfelt effort of a woman who had lived under the harsh glare of power and still chose to focus her energy on the fragile hearts and minds of the next generation. Supporters pointed to the way Melania spoke about children, not as political pawns or symbols, but as individuals who deserve safety, kindness, and respect. They noted how she emphasized mental health, an issue that had long been ignored in American politics, especially for young people. While Be Best might not have rolled out sweeping federal programs, its supporters saw it as a reminder, a nudge for families, schools, and communities to take the well-being of children seriously in an age when bullying could follow them home through their phones and anxiety could grow silently behind closed doors. They argued that the campaign, though modest, was deeply personal. Melania had not come into the White House with a background in politics or activism. She was a first lady in one of the most combative administrations in modern American history, where every gesture was scrutinized, mocked, or dismissed. And yet, instead of choosing a glamorous cause or a safe ceremonial role, she chose something tender and human, protecting children. In this light, Be Best was less about policy and more about principle, less about politics and more about compassion. Some defenders even suggested that Be Best was Melania's quiet rebellion, her way of softening an environment dominated by conflict and division. If her husband's presidency was defined by confrontation, then perhaps her initiative was defined by care. Supporters saw her as a woman trying to carve a space for gentleness in a political climate that left little room for it. And while critics called it vague or insincere, her defenders insisted that not every effort needed to be measured in bills passed or budgets signed. Sometimes the value of a campaign lay in its symbolism, in its ability to start conversations and remind a divided nation of shared values. For those who chose to see it this way, Be Best was not a failure. It was a testament to the fact that even in the harshest political storms, there could be an attempt, however small, to put children first. And for them, Melania Trump's legacy as First Lady would always include that effort, the quiet, imperfect, but undeniably human act of standing up for the youngest and most vulnerable. Despite the swirling debates and fierce criticisms, Be Best did leave its mark, albeit in ways quieter and subtler than the public spectacle might have suggested. The campaign's tangible contributions were measured not in sweeping legislation or headline-grabbing reforms, but in practical tools, collaborations, and awareness that slowly but steadily reached children, parents, and educators across the nation. One of the most notable outcomes was a series of educational resources and guidelines designed to help families navigate the complex, often treacherous world of social media. These materials covered topics from online safety and digital etiquette to mental health tips offering parents a roadmap for conversations that might otherwise feel impossible in the chaotic pace of modern life. Beyond printed materials and brochures, Be Best forged partnerships with organizations committed to child welfare and mental health. Foundations, nonprofits, and advocacy groups joined forces with the First Lady's office to expand the reach of the initiative. Through workshops, campaigns, and public events, these collaborations helped embed the principles of Be Best into communities, schools, and programs that were already working to protect and empower children. While the initiative never aimed to replace existing social programs, it created a bridge between government attention and grassroots efforts, amplifying the voices of those already fighting for young people. Perhaps the most enduring achievement of Be Best was its ability to spark conversations. In homes, classrooms, and public discourse, discussions about cyberbullying, responsible technology use, and children's mental health became slightly more prominent than before. Parents were prompted to ask their children harder questions, schools were nudged to consider policies on social media use, and public attention was drawn to challenges that often existed quietly behind closed doors. Even critics acknowledged that for all its flaws, Be Best had managed to raise awareness about issues that were often overlooked, reminding the nation that children's welfare was not a partisan concern, it was a universal one. In the end, the impact of Be Best was neither dazzling nor revolutionary, but it was real. The initiative offered a collection of tools, partnerships, and conversations that quietly reinforced the value of protecting and nurturing young people. It was a modest legacy, yet in a world of constant noise, its subtle contributions were all the more meaningful. Melania Trump, through her careful and measured approach, had created a space for dialogue and reflection, leaving behind a campaign whose echoes could still be felt in classrooms, homes, and communities across America. In that sense, Be Best succeeded not through spectacle, but through the quiet persistence of its message that the well-being of children matters every day in ways both small and profound. Perhaps the most powerful part of the campaign is not what it accomplished in concrete terms, but what it provokes in reflection. It invites us to ask difficult questions. Can an initiative led from within the walls of power ever escape the influence of the political environment around it? Can sincerity exist in a sphere where optics and strategy are inseparable from action? And ultimately, the most personal question, did Melania Trump truly believe in the message of Be Best? Or was it another form of performance in a world where every gesture is scrutinized, debated, and dissected? These questions remain open, unresolved, and perhaps that is exactly the point. Be Best is less a completed project and more a mirror reflecting our hopes, our skepticism, and our desire to see the young people in our society treated with care, dignity, and respect. And as the debate continues, one thing is certain: the conversation about the welfare of children, about kindness in a digital age, and about the roles we assign to those in power has been sparked. And it is up to each of us to decide in our own hearts and minds whether Be Best is a legacy worth remembering or merely words written on paper. So we leave the question with you. Do you believe Melania Trump sincerely invested in this campaign? Or do you see it as another layer of political performance designed more for optics than impact? And now, as we reach the close of our reflection on Be Best, the story does not end here. It begins a conversation, one that depends on you, the audience, to continue. We've explored the campaign from every angle: its inception in the White House Rose Garden, the idealistic vision of advocating for children, the applause, the criticism, and the debates that followed. We've seen both the skepticism and the support, the contradictions, and the small but tangible impacts. But ultimately, what Be Best means is not for me, nor for the media, nor even for political commentators to decide alone. It is a question that belongs to you. So we ask directly, what do you think was Be Best, a sincere effort by Melania Trump to protect and guide children in a complex digital age? Or was it largely symbolic, a performance designed to convey compassion and initiative without fundamentally changing the system around it? How do we judge the effectiveness of campaigns like this, especially when good intentions are entangled with the harsh realities of politics? Your voice matters because public discourse is not just about listening, it's about engaging, questioning, and holding up a mirror to the society we all share. Comment below with your thoughts, reflections, and even disagreements. Share your perspective. Did Be Best touch real lives, or did it remain a polished phrase on a podium? By discussing it, you help shape the narrative and remind us that children's welfare, mental health, and responsible use of technology are issues that go beyond politics and personal opinion. Every comment, every story, every perspective adds nuance to our understanding. And it is through these collective conversations that we gain insight, empathy, and even inspiration. And if you found this analysis enlightening, thought-provoking, or simply worth your time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. By doing so, you will join a community committed to diving deeper into social and political issues, unpacking the layers of intention, impact, and human consequence that often lie beneath headlines. Together, we can continue exploring, questioning, and learning not just about campaigns like Be Best, but about the forces that shape our culture, our leadership, and our values. So take a moment, reflect, and participate. The story of Be Best is ongoing, and your voice is part of its living legacy. Engage in the conversation, challenge assumptions, and let us know when your view is Be Best a genuine effort, or is it a symbolic gesture crafted for optics? The discussion starts now, and it begins with you. Thank you for watching. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Be Best, and what questions or topics would you like us to explore next? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our latest videos.